Nigerian Correctional Services Act 2019, Suppression of Piracy, and other Maritime Act 2019, amongst others. Historic reforms to our constitutional and other public laws, including the first ever amendment to the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria to support the engagement of young persons in our politics by persons not too young to run legislation, as well as to improve the funding and the independence of state legislatures and judiciaries, and acting overdue reform through the Electoral Act 2022. Finally, enacting into law the Petroleum Industry Act 2021 after close to 2 decades of drastic debates and delays leading to the commercialization of NNPC Limited and other much-needed reforms to our energy sector. This important law also complements other landmark legislations, such as the Deep Offshore and Inland Basin Production Sharing Contract Act 1993, Amendment Act 2019, to increase oil and gas revenues accruing to the Federation. Enacting Annual Finance Act of 2019, 2020, and 2021 to support our annual budgets and respond to emerging tax, fiscal, and economic issues, including 1, reducing headline corporate tax rates for small and medium-sized enterprises. 2, reforming Arctic tax legislation in line with global best practices to combat base erosion and transfer pricing. And 3, reforming the taxation of securities, lending, and real estate investment trusts to spur increased investment on our capital markets. And 4, empowering the Federal Inland Revenue Service and the Nigerian Customs Service to optimize their use of technology to more efficiently collect taxes and levies. And 5, increasing VAT revenues predominantly to support our states and local governments' precious finances during and after the impact of coronavirus pandemic on the economy. Furthermore, we have issued 11 presidential executive orders on a range of important issues, including the promotion of transparency and efficiency in the business environment 2017, promoting local procurement by government agencies 2017, the submission of annual budgetary estimates by all statutory and non-statutory agencies, including incorporated companies wholly owned by the federal government of Nigeria 2017, the voluntary asset and income declaration scheme 2017, planning and execution of projects, promotion of Nigerian content in contrast, science, engineering, and technology 2018, the voluntary offshore asset regularization scheme 2018, orphan defecation and enhanced sanitation 2019, the innovative road infrastructure development and refurbishment investment tax scheme 2019, and the National Public Buildings Maintenance 2022. We would not have made these historical achievements without the exceptional partnership this administration has had with the leadership and members of the National Assembly. So may I pause here to once again thank the Senate and the House of Representatives for your engagement, support, and contribution to these successes, which history will remember us all favorably for. The 2023 budget was prepared amid a very challenging world economy that is weakened by the lingering effects of the coronavirus pandemic, high inflation, high crude oil prices, resulting in huge costs of PMS subsidy and negative spillover effects of Russia-Ukraine war. Many economies around the world are currently contending with fiscal instability, slow growth, food crisis, and high interest rates. Like many other countries, our economy faces headwinds from low revenues, high inflation, exchange rate depreciation, and insecurity. However, Nigeria's real gross domestic product grew by 3.54% in the second quarter of 2022, making the seventh consecutive quarter of growth. Our interventions and reflationary measures have been very effective and impactful. We must, however, continue to work towards achieving much higher levels of growth, especially given our high population growth rate, so that the average Nigerian can truly feel the impact of planned economic growth. Distinguished senators and honorable members, despite continuing efforts, unemployment, underemployment, and poverty rates remain high. We are currently implementing several skills development programs and work opportunity programs to enhance the employability of our youth and tackle the troubling level of youth unemployment. While it is evident that our economy still faces significant challenges, what could have happened without the implementation of some of the measures we introduced would have been much worse for the country. Distinguished and honorable members of the National Assembly, the implementation of the 2022 budget of economic growth and sustainability commenced on the first day of the year. It was, however, necessary to forward an amended budget proposal to address some exigent issues, especially the significant increase in fuel subsidy. The amended 2022 budget was based on a benchmark oil price of 73 United States dollars per barrel, oil production of 1.60 million barrels per day, and exchange rate of 410.15 naira to United States dollar. As at 31st July 2022, federal government's retained revenue was 3.6 trillion naira, excluding the revenue of government-owned enterprises. Thus, revenue collection was only 63% of our target, largely due to the underperformance of oil and gas revenue sources. Despite higher oil prices in 2022, oil revenue was below target due to significant oil production shortfalls and high petrol subsidy costs resulting from the significant rise in crude prices, which ultimately increased PMS prices worldwide. Oil output stood at an average of 1.30 million barrels per day as at June 2022, while the sum of 1.59 trillion naira was spent on fuel subsidy between January and June 2022. The NNPC, working in collaboration with security and other relevant agencies, is putting in place additional measures to curb the incidence of pipeline vandalism and crude oil theft in order to meet our crude oil production quota. On the expenditure side, the sum of 8.29 trillion naira had been spent by July 31st, 2022, out of the total appropriation of 17.32 trillion naira. Despite our revenue challenges, we have consistently met our debt service commitments. Staff salaries and statutory transfers have also been paid as and when due. Total non-debt recurrent expenditure in January to July 2002 was 3.24 trillion naira, of which 2.87 trillion naira was for salaries, pensions, and overheads. A total of 3.09 trillion naira was spent on debt service obligations during the period. Furthermore, about 1.48 trillion naira had been released to MDAs for capital expenditure as at the end of July 2022. I am pleased to inform you that we expect to fund MDAs, that's ministries, departments, and agencies, capital budget fully by the end of fiscal year 2022. To further address structural problems in the economy and to drive growth, capital releases thus far have been prioritized in favor of critical ongoing projects in the power, roads, rail, agriculture, as well as health and education sectors. As at the end of July 2022, the fiscal operations of the federal government resulted in an estimated budget deficit of 4.63 trillion naira. Deficit 4.6 trillion naira. This represents 63% of the estimated deficit for the full year. This is largely attributable to revenue shortfalls and higher debt service obligations resulting from rising debt levels and interest rates. The deficit was mainly financed through domestic borrowing amounting to 4.2 trillion naira. Internal borrowing, 4.4 trillion naira. Hence, total public debt stock increased from 39.6 trillion naira as at the end of December 2021 to 42.8 trillion naira as at the end of June 2022. However, our debt position remains within cautious and acceptable limits compared to peer countries. As at the end of June 2022, total public debt is within our self-imposed limit of 40% of GDP, which is significantly below the 55% international threshold for comparator countries and a global average of 99% post-coronavirus. Nonetheless, our debt service to revenue ratio needs close attention. The current low revenue performance of government as reflected in the low revenue to GDP ratio of just about 8%. Our medium-term objective remains to raise this ratio to 15%, at which the debt service to revenue ratio will cease to be a concern. Mr. Senate President and Right Honorable Speaker, revenue shortfalls remain the greatest threat to Nigeria's fiscal viability. We have therefore accelerated efforts towards ensuring that all taxable Nigerians declare their income from all sources and pay taxes due to the appropriate authorities. We are also monitoring the internally generated revenue of ministries, departments, and agencies to ensure they are appropriately accounted for and remitted to the Consolidated Revenue Fund. The 50% cost-to-income ratio in the Finance Act 2020 has significantly improved operating surplus remittances by government-owned enterprises. I therefore solicit the continuing cooperation of the National Assembly in enforcing the legal provision and other prudential guidelines imposed on the government-owned enterprises during the consideration of the budget proposals of the government-owned enterprises. I am happy to report that the revenue collection and expenditure management reforms we are implementing are yielding positive results, with recent significant improvements in non-oil revenue performance. However, while we continue to implement revenue administration reforms and improve our collection efficiency, we urgently need to find new ways of generating revenue. As we seek to grow our government revenues, we must also focus on the efficiency of utilization of our limited resources. Critical steps we are taking include immediate implementation of additional measures towards reducing the cost of governance and the discontinuation of fuel subsidy in 2023 as announced earlier. We are, however, mindful of the fact that reducing government spending too drastically can be socially destabilizing, and so we'll continue to implement programs to support the more vulnerable segments of the society. Petrol subsidy has been a recurring and controversial public policy issue in our country since the early 80s. However, its current fiscal impact has clearly shown that the policy is unsustainable. As a country, we must now control this issue, taking cognizance of the need to provide safety nets to cushion the attendant effects on some segments of society. Over the last year, this administration has implemented several priority projects. Our focus has been on the completion of key road and rail projects, the effective implementation of power sector projects, the provision of clean water, construction of irrigation infrastructure and dams across the country, and critical health projects such as upgrading primary health care centers across the 6 geopolitical zones. We have also gone further on the implementation of several power generation, transmission, and distribution projects, as well as off-grid solutions, all aimed towards achieving the national goal of optimizing power supply by 2025. In the determination to ramp up grid electricity supply to at least 7,000 megawatts by 2024, we have procured purpose-built critical power equipment under the Presidential Power Initiative with Siemens, as we promised. These projects will have multiplier effect on the economy. Under the road infrastructure tax credit scheme, we are undertaking the construction and rehabilitation of about 2,000 kilometers of roads and bridges nationwide to be financed by the grant of tax credits to investing primary companies. As I have mentioned earlier, we have made appreciable progress in the rehabilitation and reconstruction of key road networks like the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway, Abuja, Kaduna, Kano Expressway, and the East-West Road in Niger Delta. Work has also reached completion stage on the Apapa Owo-Rokosoki Expressway, Loko Oweto Bridge, and the second Niger Bridge. We hope to commission these projects before the end of our tenure in 2023. Furthermore, We have awarded several contracts to rehabilitate